Welcome back, Netrunner fans, to part 2 of my Quorum review. In this section, we're going to be looking at all the Corp cards in the pack. First up is a new 3-for-1 agenda for HB. This is Sensor Net Activation. It's a security subtype. Place 1 agenda counter on it when you score it. Hosted agenda counter, res a Bioroid, ignoring all costs. When the turn ends, de-res that Bioroid. Here's potentially a neat little ability for some of the Architects of Tomorrow decks that we've seen. There have been a lot of new Bioroids that are high-end and really powerful, especially the Fairchilds, and that's going to be the type of target that you're going to want for this Sensor Net activation. This could also be pretty good with the Surratt City Grid brain taping warehouse thing that we've seen, because it's going to give you another way to trigger that Surratt City Grid, potentially making it so that you have an even larger, even bigger, deeper server. The reservations I have about this card are reservations I have about a lot of 3-for-1s. Even though this card, I think, has an ability that's pretty strong, it's just as a 3-for-1 is going to be really hard to include in a lot of scoring patterns. It's kind of messy to include that because 3-pointers aren't the greatest. And so I think for that reason, it's probably only going to see play in those very specialized contexts I just talked about. The next card is a new HB operation. It's Violet Level Clearance. This is 5 to play, it's 3 influence, it's 1 to trash, it's a terminal and it's a transaction. After you resolve this operation, end your action phase, that's the terminal part. Gain 8 credits and draw 4 cards. On face value, this card doesn't seem all that great. The cost is pretty high, and then the drawing 4 cards, that's going to be too many cards for a lot of corps to really want to draw. So I think this is really going to rely on one of 2 things. First of all, if your hand size is really huge, which is a possible in HB, especially out of cerebral imaging, that really changes this card, because drawing all 4, you'll be able to keep those, makes your hand size way bigger. The credits are going to also help you with cerebral imaging's ability. The other alternative is if you have good reason to discard cards. So like an industrial genomics deck might want to use this to overdraw and then be able to discard cards to pump up the trash costs of stuff. That seems useful, but 3 influence, probably going to keep it out of that deck. I think realistically this is going to be a tool for the cerebral imaging decks. It's going to help you find the hasty combo as quickly as possible, and it's going to give you just another decent econ tool. The 1 trash cost is going to be less of an issue if your hand size is super huge, so I could anticipate this seeing a little bit of play in CI. Next up is a new piece of ice for Jinteki. This is Chiyashi. It's a 12 to res, 8 strength barrier AP, and it's 2 influence. Whenever the runner breaks a subroutine on Chiyashi while there is an AI installed, trash the top 2 cards of the runner's stack. Then it has 3 subs. The first 2 are do 2 net damage, and the last one is end the run. We've seen a lot of big high-end ice lately that have been really strong. This is definitely right in that line. This is going to be really expensive to break as an 8 strength barrier with 3 subs, and this AI thing is really the icing on the cake. That's going to be really difficult to deal with if you're using AI as a supplemental breaker or as your primary breaker. You see a lot of that out of Anarch. So with Faust or Eater, to a lesser extent Opman, those are going to be something that when you run up against this, it's going to be really hard to break this because you're going to have to deal with all these mills. This fits right into the potential unleash sort of thing, where you're trying to mill a bunch of cards as targets for arc lockdown. Then you can potentially leave them without an icebreaker or make it so that they can't levy and get enough cards back. This is going to fit right in with that. And on top of that, it's just a pretty decent taxing piece of ice, even if it is really expensive. Now, the biggest reservation I have is that I think big ice are kind of in a uniquely bad position right now, especially with the Anarch Council we looked at in the last part of this review. There are some easy ways to chew through stuff like this, And so while even though I think this is a pretty good piece of ice, I'm not sure that it's really in the best place in the metagame right at the moment. Next up is a new operation for Jinteki. This is Psychokinesis. It's 1 to play, it's 2 influence, it's terminal, which means after you resolve this operation, end your action phase. Look at the top 5 cards of R&D. If any of those cards are agendas, assets, or upgrades, you may install one of those cards in a remote server. This is kind of what Precognition wanted to be, but I still think that this is kind of iffy on being playable. The cool thing about this is it's going to let you find the right asset, I think most of the time, that you need. So I could maybe see it being pretty good in the very asset, bioethics, hostile infrastructure driven Jinteki decks, maybe even out of Potential Unleashed. But outside of that, I'm not sure that this is really going to be that great. I could maybe see it in a PE style if you want to have a bunch of nasty unadvanced traps, but there just aren't that many of those, and I don't think it's really going to be worth it to play this in that deck when you could just draw more cards and play those kind of normally. So I don't know, I'm pretty iffy on this. It's a cool card. It definitely seems more on the right power level of this kind of effect than we saw with Precognition, but that's about the best thing I have to say about it. Next up, we have a new 4-for-2 agenda for NBN. This is Net Quarantine. It's a security subtype. The runner's base link strength is reduced to 0 during the first trace each turn. Whenever the runner increases his or her link strength by spending credits, gain 1 credit for every 2 credits spent. Here's a 4-for-2 with a powerful ability that's actually good enough. And this, I think, could really fit into some of the emerging NBN, more glacier control-oriented styles, especially using Aryabhata Tech, which is a really, really powerful tool for those decks. This is really going to fit right in there. It's going to not only make it easier to win that first trace per turn, but it's also going to give you this little bonus if they do pump up the trace. And I'd also point out that we're in an era of kind of unprecedented link. There is the Security Nexus decks, which generally play a fair number of link cards, and just with all the tagging and NBN going around, it's a lot more beneficial from a runner perspective to play link than it has been in the past. I'd also point out that in faction, we could copy this ability with Media Blitz, which is a card that people have been more interested in lately in combination with Restructured Data Pool, giving you another good outlet for Media Blitz there. Perhaps we could see a Making News, maybe Sync style deck that could use these to good effect. Next up, we have a new piece of ice for NBN. This is Herald. It's a 2-to-res, 1 strength code gate. It's 2 influence. If Herald is accessed from R&D, the runner must reveal it. When the runner accesses Herald, he or she encounters it. Ignore this ability if the runner accesses Herald from archives. Then it has 2 subs. The Corp gains 2 credits, and the Corp may pay up to 2 credits to place that number of advancement tokens on a card that can be advanced, and Herald has a trash cost of 1. This is certainly not blowing me away, but I think it could see a little bit of play. First of all, it's just a cheap code gate, cheap to res. It's going to give you this nice 2 credit bonus thing with its first sub. The second sub, I think, is really where the card is tricky to use. Advancement tokens, that's going to pretty much just be either some kind of asset or agenda, which NBN doesn't have a tremendous number of, or maybe like advanceable ice, but those are generally pretty bad. The only thing that I can really think of is sometimes with Harpsichord Studios, you'll do a play where you install 2 agendas, and then the runner can only steal one of those 2, so you'll be free to try to score the one next turn. Now, it'd be really awkward to try to time the Herald there, but that is an outlet potentially for this. I think as long as we don't really have a lot of good outlets for this, cards, especially assets to advance within NBN, there aren't a lot of great ones. So I anticipate this not seeing a ton of play until we get some better advancement outlets. Next up, we have a new piece of ice for Wayland. This is Veritas. It's 4 to res, 2 strength Century Tracer. It's 3 influence. It has 3 subroutines. The first one is the Corp gains 2 credits. The second is the runner loses 2 credits. And the third is trace 2. If successful, give the runner 1 tag. This is a type of ice that Wayland already has several of, but this has some advantages over some of its competitors. Shadow was sort of the original ice of this type, and early in Netrunner that saw a fair amount of play, but it hasn't really since then. Also, Errand Boy, again, a pretty similar kind of ice, multi-sub sentries that don't end the run but have some sort of punishing effect. I think this one has the potential to be better than those other two, just because of that middle subroutine of them losing 2 credits is a pretty powerful effect. It makes it so that when they face check this, you're not only going to gain some credits, but they're going to lose some, and that's pretty good. Another thing I point out is this is 3 to break with Mimic. That's not bad at all. Mimic's still a really popular way to deal with sentries, and this is going to be 3 to break. That gets really expensive over time. This is definitely not breaking new ground, but I think it's good enough to see play as maybe a 1 or 2 of to help defend your central servers, especially early in the game. Assuming you don't want to play one of the alternatives, especially the cheap sentries that trash programs, which I think are a much scarier face check and are in the same sort of price range. Next up, we have a new upgrade for Wayland. This is Brian Stinson. He's 2 to res, 5 to trash, he's 3 influence, he's unique and he's a character. While the runner has fewer than 6 credits, Brian Stinson gains, click, play a transaction operation from archives, ignoring all costs. Remove that transaction from the game instead of trashing it. I really like this design. I'm not sure how easy to use this is going to be, but I do think this is a very cool card. First of all, he's an upgrade, so that's going to make him much easier to defend than if he were an asset. You can put him in a server that's already defended. Now, he has 2 huge limiting factors. First of all, you're going to have to play enough transactions in your deck that you can do something powerful with this. Right off the top of my head, there's some pretty good ones, though. Restructure is kind of ridiculous with this since you get to ignore the play cost. That's pretty good. Hedge fund's a decent target. You could do it with the level clearances, maybe even the violet that we looked at earlier in this pack. So there's definitely some decent targets for this. The bigger problem is this fewer than 6 credits thing. That's a really low number of credits. It's pretty much only going to work if you get it off really early in the game, or if you have some sort of effect that's going to drain the runner's credits. You could potentially do that with some of the ice, maybe the one we just looked at, but I think more realistically, you're going to have to play something like closed accounts in order to enable this. Now, that's already maybe a decent card in a lot of Wayland decks, especially if you're doing tagging. Might be a decent 1 or 2 of. But using that sort of combo, I think, is going to be really cumbersome. Maybe in the future, if we see some more synergy based around transactions, this guy could be a little bit more realistic. Because this seems like the type of card where you'd want to build your deck around him. But I don't really think that there's enough stuff there for that to really be worthwhile. The next card is a neutral asset. It's called NASX. It's 2 to res, it's 4 to trash, it's 0 influence, and it's unique. Gain 1 credit when your turn begins. Whenever you gain credits through a card ability other than NASX, you may spend up to 2 credits to place that many power counters on it. Click, trash, gain 2 credits for each power counter on it. At first glance, this might just seem like a strictly better pad campaign, but this certainly has some disadvantages over pad campaign, namely that it's unique. Not only does that mean that you can't have 2 of it rezzed, but it also makes it vulnerable to rumor mill, which is a pretty popular current. It's just going to blank this thing. Outside of the vulnerability to rumor mill, this has a lot of great interactions with a ton of different cards. First of all, your average Glacier style deck is going to be playing assets that make money. Pad Campaign, Adonis Campaign, Commercial Bankers Group, all that kind of stuff is going to pump this thing up, and that could potentially make you a lot of money. Now, on top of that, IDs that have some sort of a credit effect, whether it's ETF or the core set Wayland, these are going to charge it as well. So I think in particular, the core set Wayland looks to be a really powerful thing with this, because you'd play a transaction and you're going to be able to charge this thing twice, since both the ID and the transaction are going to gain you credits. This is a very cool design. It's going to at very least be a drip economy tool, which basically any long-term kind of more control-oriented deck will want. But then it also potentially has this way to gain a ton of credits through interactions with other cards you're probably already playing. Next up is a neutral piece of ice. This is Macrophage. It's 3 to res, 7 strength code gate tracer, and it's 0 influence. It has 4 subroutines. The first one is Trace 4, if successful purge virus counters. The second is Trace 3, if successful trash 1 virus. The third is Trace 2, if successful remove a virus in the heap from the game. And the last sub is Trace 1, if successful end the run. This card is so cool. I really love this design. First of all, 3 to res, 7 strength code gate with 4 subs. That's really cost effective. Now these subs are traces, so it's going to be pretty easy to beat them, especially if you're playing link cards. And it's pretty specialized in that a lot of these subs aren't going to do much of anything if your runner opponent doesn't have some sort of virus thing. But here's the thing. Pretty much all runner decks play viruses. There's a ton of really good viruses, especially out of Anarch. From Medium to Data Sucker to Parasite, there are lots and lots of viruses that people play. So this is going to be a really effective way to deal with those. But then it's also going to remove it from the game so that they're not able to just deja vu it back to their hand. But really, I think the thing that pushes this card over the edge into very broad-based playability is the fact that it can still end the run. And additionally, it's got 4 traces on a really cheap to res piece of ice. So if you're playing an NBN deck that relies on a bunch of traces, you're using, say, Aryabhata Tech, this starts to look like a 2 or maybe even 3 of piece of ice. I could see this seeing play as a 1 or 2 of in other decks as well, just because viruses are so ubiquitous, and it's really important that we have some way to deal with them, and this is a way to do it in a really cheap piece of ice that's expensive to break. The last card in the pack is also a neutral piece of ice. This is Tribunal. It's a 7 to res, 3 strength sentry, it's 0 influence. It has 3 subs that are all the same. The runner trashes 1 of his or her installed cards. Compared to the piece of ice that we just looked at, this seems downright bad. Did they forget that Mimic is the main way that we've broken sentries since Core Set? I know this is going to be a 3 credit tax against Mimic, but it's also a 7 to res sentry, and I'm pretty sure you can find a better sentry to play, especially in a Glacier style, just within your faction. Or I would definitely rather play Assassin than this in a vast majority of cases. I really don't understand what's going on with this thing. It just seems underpowered to me. I think it could pretty easily have 4 strength and then it might be a little bit more reasonable. Or maybe if it had another instance of this subroutine, then it would at least be a 4 credit tax with Mimic. That looks a little bit stronger. I don't know, this just seems too weak to me. I don't really anticipate this seeing any play. That's going to do it for my Quorum review. Well, this is the end of the Flashpoint cycle, and I think this cycle has really been a mixed bag. On one hand, we've seen some really insanely powerful cards. I would argue some that are maybe a little too powerful. But then we've also seen a lot of cards that are really weak and I don't think are going to see much play. Like I've commented before, the Flashpoint seems to have a much higher percentage of playable cards, and I think that's a great trend. But I do still worry when we see cards like this Tribunal at the end of the pack, and they're in the same pack as cards that are insanely powerful, metagame distorting kind of things. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments section what I'm right or wrong about. I'll see you soon for some more Netrunner stuff.